Welcome back, everybody, to the Victory Road World Cup of Pokemon VGC, brought to you by Elgato, Metafi, and GT Tour. I am Connor Johnson, once again joined by Mavo Rourke. I know we're going to be coming into this final game of the stream for the week of second stream, of the top 16. And we've got some players with a lot of fun facts tied to them, and it's going to be great to see how we can wrap up this week of streaming.
Yeah, both of these players were in day 2 of the World Championships this year. Yuma, for those of you who may remember who were watching the streams, I believe, Yuma had that really interesting Whimsicott that had both Tickle and Worry Seed. So it was kind of a Pokemon that had a really interesting kind of tech that a lot of us weren't exactly prepped for. They also, I think, he made top cut, fell with a 5-2 record to Davide Carrere, and then Chaiyawat used that Rinya's Sun and lost to Megan Rattle, who ended up going to that top 8. So, both of these teams right now as well, if Thailand wins, Thailand has moved on, and that knocks Japan out. And Japan also fell pretty early in last year's World Cup, and I doubt that they want to fall early again. So Japan really looking for a win here, really fishing for a big result coming out from Yuma today. And I think that Yuma knows that there is a lot of pressure on him just to try and keep their team moving forward in this competition, because Japan is obviously a powerhouse of a team. They have a lot of incredible talent, world champion on the team, or second place world, Shohei, everything like that. There's just a lot of talent that I know that they want to show off at this point and continue to prove how talented they are moving in through the rest of the bracket.
Yeah, and that is something Japan will have riding on them for ages. A lot of people will say, it might be coming home for them this year, either in the World Championships or in the World Cup. But Thailand, had something themselves come home to them this year, which is, I believe, is their first official circuit came to them this year. So they've got a lot riding on them as well, kind of showing just because we're a very young team to the VC community doesn't mean that we haven't got extensive history in the background, as we see here with our players. Of course, Japan, 2022 World Championships top cut, we should just say we saw day 2 of some really funky sets. Japan Nationals top 4, Internats in Europe top 16, and then they've come first place in the ranked series, so a bit of really big knowledge of best of one, especially from Japanese players. But Chaiyawat, on the other hand, has had loads of forecomings and loads of finishes in their names, day 2 in Worlds, so when Thailand's first ever true participation. We've got the Thailand national champion, which they use as Xerneas team, bring Xerneas back, which is really fun to see. Of course, they did good in the Asian Players Cup, and as well in 2020, back on the 3DS, Oceania International top 32. So finishes from all varying games and styles of Pokemon from both of these players.
Yeah, both of these players are incredibly talented. This is a super exciting match just because of the absolute wealth of talent between both of them, especially as of recent, right? These are very recent results, which means that they've got a lot of comfort in this format and a lot of talent, whether that be in team building or just in playing and in the knowledge of the format in general, of the damage amounts that your Pokemon are going to do. And Yuma looks like he's bringing that team that looks very similar to what he had brought to World. So I'm really hoping we may see the funky moves sets from that Whimsicott. Chaiyawat also bringing a team that is very similar, the same 6 Pokemon that I know Gavin Michaels used to win the Vancouver regionals many months back. It's a team that we saw a lot throughout the World Cup. It's a team that I know we saw at Pokemon World Championships in general. That Lunala Groudon is a really nice set of restricteds that allow you to have that Trick Room option, but also really with this team does give you an opportunity to go for some strong ghost type attacks and a bulkier option than maybe that Calyrex Shadow Rider. Venusaur and Lunala, though, are the lead on the opposite side of the field. And then it is the Zacian and Kyogre. So almost a full 4 restricteds on the field, but Venusaur is kind of like a restricted when a Gigantamax is.
Yeah, Venusaur is basically an honorary restricted. It has so many tools and tricks up its sleeve, Gigantamax, as you said, used to have its mega form. It has sleep powder, loads of different techs it got in these new games, so we'll let it off. But seeing that lead though is showing that Chaiyawat really wants to think, if I lead with Lunala and Venusaur, they can switch in the Groudon to speed up the Venusaur, also weaken up the Kyogre. Even if not, they could maybe switch out the Venusaur to stop it taking a hit from Zacian, and then bring in Groudon, make it take a couple hits, Lunala take a couple hits more, with these Pokemon really enjoying being bulky. We do see the Whimsicott coming in, and then Chaiyawat opting to switch out. I believe that might be the Groudon coming in. That is the Groudon coming in on this slot. So the Sun is going to be up turn 1, and Venusaur is going to do its fast little zoomies, as if it's a little pet cat there doing as much as possible in this first turn.
I don't know. I feel like frogs could get zoomies if you were pretty careful, right? However, Yuma is going for that Dynamax first turn. Going to be that Kyogre as well. A great way to maybe change this weather back after you deal with something like this Venusaur. However, if this Venusaur carrying something like that Sleep Powder, you may not be too comfortable. You don't want to get too comfy too fast. You know, Whimsicott on that opposite side of the field, if it is that set that we saw from Yuma at Worlds, may be an interesting one to go for something like Worry Seed onto its partner. However, a little too late because that Sleep Powder from the Venusaur onto that Kyogre is able to put it to sleep to really try and stall out these Dynamax turns, keep the weather in this Venusaur's favor, can go for its own Dynamax on that next turn, go for something like that G-Max Fine Lash target into that Kyogre, who you know is not going to be able to get that Max Guard next turn, thanks to that at least bare minimum a bit of sleep that it's going to need, and it's going to allow this Groudon, I think, to be really comfortable as well. Chaiyawat as well, I think, is really in a nice position moving forward for this Gigantamax Venusaur. If that's the Pokemon he chose, could also have been the Groudon, but yeah, this Venusaur I think is going to really help him move forward in the game.
Yeah, he's going to move forward exponentially and very easily just because of the position he's in. Of course, in Sun, so even if Kyogre wakes up, it's doing less damage unless it goes for a Max Hailstorm. You do see a Tailwind coming out from the Whimsicott there, just trying to make sure that you can get as much speed going as possible for those later turns. The Vine Lash goes into the Kyogre, doesn't do a hefty amount of damage, but does enough to be scary given how we know what happens afterwards with that residue effect. We see a Max Hailstorm come out, so I believe that's a turn 1 wake, which is amazing for Yuma there. Goes straight into that Venusaur, does a really big chunk of damage in return, which again, yes, it doesn't get a knockout, but that is, you know, the sun is gone, so, you know, we could see a lot of speed to that Tailwind, plus lack of sun. And then you see a Fire Punch come out, go into that Whimsicott, which is a very bulky Whimsicott. We see it does get burned. Of course, that isn't too unfortunate given it's a special attacker. That is two sets of chip, even because it's a grass type, going onto it for these forthcoming turns.
Yeah, I mean, that burn is really just the nice bit, right? Just to add more chip damage. And you're also getting this G-Max Vine Lash damage as well onto that Kyogre, which is really nice because that chip damage can be so huge moving forward. Interesting to see, though, if this Pokemon, you know, actually, yeah, seeing the moveset from this Kyogre does confirm to me that it is probably that Assault Vest variant, which is why it didn't take as much damage as maybe expected from that G-Max Vine Lash. But now that the sun is gone, you are going to be moving first, so you can probably go for something like another Hailstorm, or you could even go for a Geyser into that Groudon, get that big threat of that restricted Pokemon off of the field while you know Lunala is hiding in the back. Try and get as much damage off as you can, keeping this Incineroar that we can see at least in the back to maybe deal with that Lunala later on in the game, thanks to maybe some sort of dark type move like Throat Chop. Or Darkest Lariat, if that's possibly an option that it's carrying for that moveset. Looks like the Whimsicott's just going to switch out here, though, and it's going to bring in this Zacian to put on a lot of pressure onto both of the Pokemon on the opposite side of the field. Get that attack boost as well, because there is nothing to stop it. Currently, no Intimidate users that have so far met the field. Groudon as well, going to be switching out, going to bring its own Incineroar back in, so there it is. There is that Intimidate user on Chaiyawat's side.
Yeah, Intimidate coming in, it's going to be amazing in front of that Zacian because, you know, Zacian, you know, albeit isn't going to be taking the biggest drops, it's only going to go to a neutral attack stat, but in front of the Pokemon like Venusaur, which are sometimes built to take the neutral Beam of Blade, it can be very good. But as you see, though, the Sash is revealed as well on this Incineroar from a really powerful Max Geyser. It's going to get rid of that Hail, so, you know, it's going to be unfortunate that the chip won't continue on that Focus Sash, but it's going to be very nice, you know, for making sure these wall type moves are even stronger going forward, because even the Venusaur's not going to appreciate that. And, you know, you go for a Max Hailstorm, possibly get a knockout on the Venusaur, and go into the Incineroar as well with the chip, but unfortunately it will end the Dynamax factor. I mean, that would have to be maybe an Ice Beam, or maybe just go for a Water Spout or an Origin Pulse and hope for the best.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, right, the thought, though, is that you switch this Incineroar out that's got that 1 HP, you bring the Groudon back in, allows your Venusaur to go faster, so you're not taking damage from something like an Origin Pulse, and then you can at least try and get some more damage off with another G-Max Fine Lash. Instead, though, going to be a fake out from the Incineroar. No switches here to be seen. The Origin Pulse here only actually looks like it connected onto that G-Max Venusaur, but it did not hit onto that Incineroar, just thanks to that low accuracy being a miss there. So a little bit more extra chip damage as we move through, but interesting to see that they actually allowed for that Venusaur to get knocked out, kind of trying to see what their game plan is moving towards the end of, you know, moving towards the end now that both of the Dynamax has ended and the game will slow down slightly.
Yeah, I do believe that wasn't Ice Beam, though. May that did go
Ice
into
Beam,
that
thank you, sorry.
Even the animation, you confused me a little bit there. I got a bit sidetracked. But the sun coming in is going to mean those ice beams going to be a little bit more optimal, unless you want to maybe go for an Origin Pulse this turn to try and get damage onto the Groudon, knock out that Incineroar so your Zacian isn't as scared, and then you can just maybe go for a Behemoth Blade and the Groudon. It's not going to appreciate it. I did see a grass type move being hovered over, and if we have seen the second Solar Blade Zacian in this stream, that's going to be an amazing call. You see the Incineroar is swapping out in favor of the Lunala. Lunala, you know, is going to take these hits quite well, given its ability in the Shadow Shield. So the Kyogre's have to work a bit to break through these. As you do see a Solar Blade does come out from that Zacian, and see how much it does. This is a neutral Zacian, and it's going to go straight down to what we assume is the Groudon Slaughter. It's gonna miss the knockout though, but it's really nice information to be revealed, and Chaiyawat now has to play around this and see if Yuma has done the count and will just get a knockout even in the sun, and it just misses as well.
Yeah, it absolutely just misses, probably hanging on with just a sliver of HP here. Precipice Blaze, I do believe there was a miss onto that Zacian, which is not the Pokemon you want to have the miss on, but it does, or sorry, onto the Kyogre, does get the knockout onto that Zacian this turn. Kyogre at least going to be taking a bunch of damage, hangs on with just 2 HP, thanks to that chip damage from the G-Max Vine Lash that was set up earlier in the game. And I think Yuma at this point, right, we see he's got 3 Pokemon left. There are 2 Pokemon that are incredibly low in HP. Whimsicott's not exactly known for its bulk. It doesn't have an option for a Focus Sash. Incineroar, I think, is a really interesting Pokemon that you're probably going to want to save for when you can break that Shadow Shield and then send it in afterwards. So if you have this Whimsicott, maybe you want to go for something to at least try and stop some of the damage output coming from the opposite side of the field. However, I think it just becomes a bit of a strange scenario wherein if that Lunala does not get its Shadow Shield broken, you can send in the Incineroar. It can go for something like a Meteor Beam, because oftentimes they carry that move. Get that full knockout onto the Incineroar, and then it's pretty smooth sailing moving forward. So as long as I think this Incineroar itself can maybe try and either 1, hope for a Meteor Beam miss, or 2, hope that this Lunala is not carrying Meteor Beam and instead is carrying a different move or a different item, and then possibly just try and fish for that to happen later in the game. Get a Fake Out off onto the Groudon itself, and maybe just try and see if your Kyogre can break that, can do enough damage to maybe allow for your Incineroar to sit comfortably later on in the game.
Yeah, making sure that Incineroar is pivoted well is going to be very beneficial for Yuma. Of course, its full job isn't going to be really retained, because we do know that Yuma has got that Rocky Helmet on his Incineroar for things like Zacian and that. Both these Pokemon, I believe, aren't affected by it. I know for sure the Lunala won't be. Groudon is one of those ones where, like, you know, it's a weird case of like animations and all that. We do see the Meteor Beam is powered up though, and of course you will get that +1 even if you go into a Protect. One of the longest animations we see in VGC these days. It does go straight into Protect, but it does not matter because the job of the +1 has been done. Ice Beams just guarantee a knockout onto the Groudon, meaning Lunala is going to be sitting here fairly uncomfortably, I feel, because, you know, it's got a Dark type sitting right in front of it, and it's got its Power Herb wasted up, meaning you have to do 2 turns for Meteor Beam.
Yeah, and the Incineroar coming in only has 1 HP, so you can at least go for the Fake Out to stop the other Incineroar for going for a Dark type move if your Fake Out is faster. At this point, I don't think we've seen both Incineroars on the field at the same time, like led at the same time, so I can't really deduce the speeds. Probably Chaiyawat's though may actually end up being slower just because he's running that Trick Room team. Yuma has a couple of different options, I think, as well. If Tailwind is still up, my turns have lost count. Kyogre though switching out for the Whimsicott, at least to allow this Kyogre to come back in, set up the rain if it needs to with its very tiny amount of HP. Yeah, Chaiyawat's Incineroar goes first here though, is going to take the recoil from the Rocky Helmet and get knocked out on his own. Lunala, able to go for that Moongeist Beam, is still going to do a decent amount of damage if targeting into this Whimsicott. It should be enough for that knockout, thanks to this Whimsicott having so little HP. Moongeist Beam though, not going to do as much damage to Incineroar if it is the option that it has to go for on that next turn. You don't want to take those 2 turns to charge up that Meteor Beam, and you may just have to go for the one move that you've got the option for. So, you know, I think it is pretty funky of an end game, right? Because I think this Lunala does not have the tools that it needs to get rid of both of these Pokemon. Like, I think this Kyogre, if you target into it and it is able to get that Origin Pulse off, you're still going to get knocked out, and then you leave this Incineroar the space to take care of this Lunala and the rest of the HP that it's got.
Yeah, Lunala, unfortunately, with its typing and just with like the weird speed tiers it has as well, it can front these Pokemon. It's gonna be a bit annoyed and the max HP is not at max. So really, if this is a Throat Chop or a Lariat coming out from the Incineroar, it is likely going to knock out. And Kyogre's gonna be here for the supporting cast. Might even go for a cheeky little war spell just to rub the cheese in. We do see a Moongeist Beam will come out, likely going into that Kyogre, just trying to get rid of as many Pokemon as possible in the field. And then, you know, Incineroar is just going to do Incineroar things. Chaiyawat, maybe knowing, hey, you know, I'll let you take it. As you see a parting shot though. So
yeah, so this Incineroar has shown Protect, so I'm almost wondering if it's dropped that Dark type move, and now you're in the rain, so you might be. Yeah, you've shown Parting Shot. You actually do not have something like Lariat because they're running that Protect thanks to that Rocky Helmet. So you may be okay if you're Chaiyawat, right? Because now your option is you have to stall out the rain that was set by your own Kyogre and then go for a Flare Blitz. But another Meteor Beam charge thanks to the Protect is actually going to be huge here for Chaiyawat. He is now at +2. You need it to hit on this next turn.
Yeah, Chaiyawat being at +2 with that Lunala calling to Protect perfectly. We do see it does come out. I do believe the Meteor Beam is being activated.
Yeah.
It does miss, I believe. So that's going to be really annoying. But again, now we have the repetition of Chaiyawat can just go for those boosts with Meteor Beam, calling and Protect, maybe going for a Moongeist Beam right now, or maybe Protect of its own to try and call out what happens here. Parting Shot will be very annoying, but we've seen that Chaiyawat can just go for that Meteor Beam again and again. If you see the power up from it though, which is going to be really annoying because there will be a Protect this next turn, which is unfortunate because Yuma has now set the pace where he is on an odd number Protect, as some call it, that is going to be protecting on the turns that attacks are going off, meaning that it's going to be very scary. You know, if Chaiyawat has no way to adapt to it, Reducing Protect is the main option. It's just going to be a back and forth here of the special attack boost from the Meteor Beam activation, the Parting Shot, and then so on and so forth until moves cannot be clicked anymore. Maybe waiting for rain to end just so you can do as much damage with Flare Blitz as possible, which does happen this turn. So Yuma now has a secondary option to go for damage, and maybe just going to chip down as much as possible until damage is a guaranteed win con.
Yeah, like you said, I think you're waiting for the rain to stop, right? You can continue to go for these Meteor Beams just until you've run out of the PP for them. Incineroar is going to continue to keep going for the Parting Shots, then has the opportunity to go for something like a Flare Blitz later on. There is no recovery option for either of these Pokemon, right? So at least at this point, you know, you're going to just keep clicking the same two moves back and forth. This is one of the few times I've seen Meteor Beam be used more than one time in a match, and it's really quite funny to me. It's almost like if you're clicking Geomancy, but then you don't get the result of it afterwards. So it's just quite interesting, right? Because now you're in this weird back and forth. You're already at 5. You already used half of your Protects. So now you have to wonder exactly what the plan is here, right? Interestingly, a Moongeist Beam is the move gone for. I'm not exactly sure how much PP was left on that Meteor Beam, but at least now you're doing damage, and that actually does a pretty decent chunk, even with those weird adds and subtractions, but a Flare Blitz to match. So 2 damaging moves. You are doing more with Moongeist Beam than you are with the Flare Blitz and the recoil. I think this means that Chaiyawat can just keep clicking Moongeist Beam.
Yeah, with the recoil coming out from Flare Blitz, Yuma is going to have to conserve his resources here, but Chaiyawat could maybe recognize this now, seeing that maybe Yuma is forced into his Flare Blitz, trying to call when a Moongeist Beam is going to happen, when a Meteor Beam is going to happen. Moongeist Beam will go and Protect there, but that is now a turn, you know, when you can maybe force into Flare Blitz. I believe a double Protect is the opt here for Yuma, as he does get it, which is going to be very good in wasting PP for the remaining turns. We do see not a Meteor Beam this time, but a great Meteor Beam call, but really hoping to just, you know, get that damage off, realizing a pattern here, Chaiyawat.
There's three options left to use Protect. Going for another Moongeist Beam this turn, though, is going to be able to do a nice chunk of damage continuously onto this Incineroar. This is probably one of the weirder end games I've seen. Does bring it down to the bottom 20% of its HP. Going to allow for this Incineroar to go for a Parting Shot. And however, I think even with a one Parting Shot, if you go for that Moongeist Beam next turn, you've gotten the knockout. And I think that kind of wraps up what is game 1 of this game. That is sure to bring us a lot of really interesting items next turn, but instead you go for that Meteor Beam, which does make sense here. You can force that Protect on the next turn. You know, the fact that Yuma does not have a Dark type move is really what is helping him here, because, you know, this Flare Blitz is not doing enough, and you're bringing yourself down. You're almost knocking yourself out here. There's going to be a Protect, right? And that's at least one more turn. But after that Protect, maybe you just go for something like that Moongeist Beam, just get that damage off to get that last 4 HP out of here, and then you can get your full knockout. Like, I think Yuma was hoping for a critical hit when he did not end up getting one, and at this point, there's nothing really that he can do beyond going for more double Protects.
Yeah, Yuma really did step back onto the back foot of this game, you know, when Chaiyawat had the ability to stall out in this late game. Not having a physical dark type move or any dark type move of damage whatsoever was a bit annoying. The Moon Guy's beam, I believe that was a Moon Guy's meter beam, I didn't quite catch the animation change, does grab the knockout, meaning that in a matchup that is normally won quite easily by the Incineroar, is taken in favor of the Lunala, which means that Chaiyawat will take on this game one, which is amazing, given how the matchups can be back and forth and the different reflections these players had in their day two Worlds performances.
So what this means to me is that this Lunala has a super comfortable Trick Room Dynamax in that next game. Because now this Lunala does not have to worry about taking something like a Darkest Lariat from this Incineroar. This Lunala could come in next to something like that Porygon 2, maybe. There it is. Next to something like that Porygon 2, could go for that Trick Room, could go for the Meteor Beam on this turn. You do not have anything that can fake you out this turn. Something could definitely go for that Protect on turn 2, but you could also go, you have that kind of weird option of who are you tricking out, right? Because this Whimsicott, if it's carrying Taunt, it could only taunt one of the two. So then do you have to take the risk of, does this Whimsicott go for Taunt? Do I then have no option to go for Trick Room? But I don't believe this Whimsicott has it, because I think from what we saw in that last game, I think it had Energy Ball, it had Tailwind, and then it had 2 normal type moves. So I don't believe that it's carrying it. And now you at least force this Zacian into a weird position of, do you force it to target into the Porygon 2 and try and get damage, or do you try and break that Shadow Shield on the Lunala before it can really start steamrolling in the middle of Trick Room turns? Porygon 2, though, going to switch out in this turn, and that is going to bring the Incineroar in.
Yeah, Incineroar switching is really good because it gives you that Intimidate onto the Zacian, so it's going to be a neutral attack, which isn't as threatening as it normally can be, but also it means that your Porygon 2 is reserved when you can get Trick Room up. A Sacred Sword into that slot, though, a great call, so even if that normal type Porygon had been hit and doing a fair bit of damage, Energy Ball going into Lunala is going to take minimal damage, but Shadow Shield is broken, and this is important for Yuma because it's broken earlier than it was in the previous game, meaning that he can go around the field and be like, okay, I can respect that you've got your HP lowered and your ability is now nullified, and now you've got to do is pivot around damage. I believe a Tickle is being hovered over here just because of that normal type move has been chosen, which means that Yuma has really opted to go for pretty much the same team as was seen at the World Championship. It does come out that as an encore. Ooh. Actually, so changing things up completely. A shocking change there. The Trick Room will be forced again. Flare Blitz coming out can go to either of these Pokemon and be a nuisance. The Soaker Sash will activate on the Whimsicott. Hopefully no burn this time, so we really know if it does happen twice. The Flare Blitz does knock out though, and Zacian is sitting comfortably in front of this now Trick Room in Lunala.
That is really clever play here, right? Because from us, I'm sorry, my Japanese is not very good, but the fact that the Encore to me was a surprise is really quite exciting. And now you've locked this Lunala in, right? It can switch into the Porygon, it can go for another Trick Room. At least this Lunala has not gone for something like that Meteor Beam, because really the best game plan is you go for Trick Room, then you get your Meteor Beam off to get +1, and then you Dynamax for the next 3 turns. And that gives you a really nice way to kind of move forward and get a bunch of damage off. However, maybe you end up going for the Trick Room this turn, you allow your Lunala to go for it, you switch it out on the next turn, and you Dynamax your Groudon, and maybe go for something like a Max Quake, boost your special defense in the face of something like a Kyogre in the opposite side of the field, and maybe target into what would be that Zacian slot, because even if it goes for a Protect, I feel like anything that could switch in there is probably going to be pretty comfortable to take a Max Quake, just based on the Pokemon that were brought in that last game. That Incineroar that we see in the back is definitely something that's not going to love taking it either, and I think it gives this Groudon a little bit more maneuverability, and you force the Lunala into being a little bit more supportive instead of going on that Dynamax like you maybe wanted to. Zacian, though, going to switch out here, and it is going to bring in that Incineroar.
Yeah, Incineroar is going to be a nuisance to the Groudon. It's going to drop its attack stat, but the Lunala knows that it can't really deal with it. The sun being up is a bit of a problem for it. That is kind of a backfire in this matchup. The Tickle does come out though, so it's a no Protect, no helping hand on this Whimsicott, probably hoping the Tickle to do just enough to keep things going. There's now -2 attack, I believe, but still does a chunk to the Incineroar. Of course, not having anything like that Sugar Berry is going to be a bit annoying. You do see the Trick Room does come out again, which isn't the end of the world given the situation, because Groudon isn't the fastest, but sadly for Chaiyawat at least, Incineroar also isn't the fastest Pokemon known to man, so it could just go for its flare blitzes in the sun and get some nice knockouts. The Groudon is at -1 defense as well as its attack. Kyogre coming in is going to reset that weather though, so the flare blitz is going to be a little less optimal, but we can just see some parting shots going out left, right and center, making these attack stats even lower, making it so that Kyogre can live for a little bit longer and get even more attacks off.
Yeah, I think at this point, right, if you go for the Dynamax, you have to go for it with that Groudon. You have to get some Max Quakes up just to stop this Kyogre from really steamrolling you, getting a nice amount of damage off, because there is still Dynamax available on both sides of the field. The Lunala at this point, if it has something like that Wide Guard, now would definitely kind of be the time to go for it if it's still trying to stall out those Trick Room turns. However, Groudon, though, going to switch out, and that is going to be bringing in the Porygon 2 on Chaiyawat's side, who we saw earlier can do a lot, can take a lot of hits, and also has the opportunity to maybe go for something like an Eerie Impulse into this Kyogre. There is going to be a Dynamax from the Lunala on this side, which I think is something that you have to Dynamax just to handle that big damage output from something like that Kyogre, who can go for some big attacks on this turn, especially with Shadow Shield broken like we saw early on in the game. Gonna maybe try and change the weather here. You could go for something like that Max Rockfall and change the weather from rain to just being that sandstorm. You may take some chip damage, but it might be worth it. A parting shot though from the Incineroar into that Lunala will lower that attack and special attack, and possibly allow for Yuma to continue to pivot around, just bring that Zacian back in maybe, and get a little bit more, get a nicer opportunity to go for something like a Behemoth Blade into these Pokemon to move kind of later on into these turns.
Yeah, getting the Zacian in instead in the Trick Room is a bit annoying, but in front of these Pokemon here, it has the moves to hit both of them fairly well. The nice little ability that has Water Spout coming out from the Kyogre is doing a nice bit of damage to both these Pokemon. The Rockfall going into what was the Incineroar, so a good little pivot from Yuma there, just getting in Zacian and in the sand as well, which means, you know, there's going to be chip damage all around, which means it's really nice for Zacian to get even more damage down on the field. Kyogre won't enjoy it as much as losing HP, and we all know as Kyogre loses HP, it loses its damage output. But it's not the end of the world, because, you know, you can easily switch out, bring Incineroar back in. It's not going to be getting attack drops on anything, you know, that it needs to be getting attack drops on, but it's still a pivot that means that Kyogre can come back in, get its brain set up with no nasty Gastrodons in the back. You know, given the team composition, it means it can happily just keep switching in and out, or even maybe go for a Dynamax, as we see Yuma is contemplating right now, just to try and get as much damage off as possible, get the weather reset, and have that back and forth of setting up the weather without having to switch out and reset the field over and over again in the face of these special attackers.
Yeah, I mean, this Kyogre was faster, right? Was faster in Trick Room than this Lunala. So Kyogre is going to at least move first. You can change the weather now. If you're going for something like, you know, a Max Phantasm to lower the defense on the opposite side of the field, maybe improve situations for the Groudon in the back to kind of come in and handle it a little bit better later on as the game, you know, kind of changes. However, I think at this point, right, Porygon 2, going for a recover makes quite a lot of sense. You're just trying to boost up your HP. You're already at 50%, so you bring it up exactly back up to full. And, you know, Kyogre at this point, able to go for that Max Geyser, will change the weather, is still going to be an incredibly strong attack, brings this Porygon down a little bit less than the amount that it had before it had clicked that recover, and it's not going to be taking that chip damage as well from the Sandstorm, but you're at least allowing this Lunala now to go for something like another Max Rockfall. You're going to keep changing the weather to allow this Kyogre to not get the exact damage output that it needs. Into this Zacian does very little damage as well, but I think having that weather control is probably what's going to be huge moving forward. The Zacian here going for a Behemoth Blade is probably going to do a ton of damage, even with any sort of drops there, and it is enough to get that Porygon 2 off of the field, who can be so pesky, especially with the fear of something like an Eerie Impulse that we hadn't actually seen yet.
Yeah, it can carry things like Eerie Impulse and carry things like Foul Play. It's one of those, you know, it's not even a one-trick pony anymore. It used to be, you know, set up Trick Room, it had Ice Beam or Thunderbolt or both, but now it's got so many different you know, moves it can choose from in especially Dynamax formats that could just be a nuisance to the field, and having it gone is just going to be such a breather, a breath of fresh air for Yuma, just thinking, okay, none of my Pokemon are at risk of stat drops, or, you know, maybe a random move that, you know, does something to my Pokemon I never thought of before. So, you know, wiping it out is a really good thing to see, and it just opens up, you know, this Kyogre to do loads of damage to a Groudon that's forced to come in. Yes, it's in the sun, but yes, it's also got its Dynamax factor, meaning it can reset the rain, and it can also do loads of damage. Incineroar is coming in here, which is going to be really good, you know, just dropping the stats on that Groudon even just a little tad more, so it's going to be less of an issue for this Kyogre to deal with even once it goes small. Of course, Lunala can also be a bit annoying because it does reduce physical defense with the effective its moves. Incineroar though is just dropping straight away, came in, did its thing, jumped off, bit like Loose Cats earlier to be honest, because you do see the Max Geyser is going to come straight through and hit into that Groudon, see how much it does, just about 50%, but will that be enough going into the later turns of this game?
Yeah, that the Precipice Blades missed on that Kyogre, which is really unfortunate for Chaiyawat because he definitely needed that damage. He needed to at least put a lot of pressure down onto Yuma's Kyogre. This, you know, these Max Rock Falls are doing so little damage, and really their only use here is the fact that they are setting the rain, right? If you went for something like a Max Phantasm and you drop the defense, it may boost the power of your Groudon moving forward. But at this point too, Zacian's going to come in. It's double restricted versus double restricted at this point. You know, both of the Pokemon on the opposite side of the field. I think for Yuma, I think he's still in a good position. There really isn't a way for Chaiyawat to reset Trick Room after this. There's not going to be a comfortable way for him to do it. He's at least got to probably try and muscle through. You're going to be moving faster than the Kyogre with your Lunala, thanks to just seeing how these speed tiers kind of shape up. But this Groudon is still going to be moving last, and even without the rain, anything from this Kyogre who's still got so much HP, any Max Geyser should be able to comfortably take this. And at least, you know, even if you end up not getting that max move, if it goes for something like a Protect, which I don't believe it has, but if it goes for something like a Protect, then you can get it on the following turn when your Dynamax is ended, because you're still at a really comfortable amount of HP. And yeah, that is the end of the match there. So I think Yuma kind of knowing that he has wrapped this up in his favor and going to move on to game 3 means that there's a lot more chance for reflection on maybe what they're going to do in that next set of games, because sending out the Lunala and getting that Trick Room up first turn seemed so promising, but now you have to worry about the threat of that Encore, which it's different than Taunt, right? Because Taunt, you can still go for an attacking move. With Encore, you're stuck into setting and resetting your Trick Room like over and over again unless you make that switch. So I think it's going to be a little bit interesting kind of moving forward to see exactly how Chaiyawat ends up kind of readjusting and changing his position here. And it looks like it's going to be a switch between that Porygon 2 bringing out that Venusaur again and the Lunala like we saw, I believe, in game 1. But the Thundurus ends up coming out here with the Kyogre, and I think that's a really nice option.
Yeah, having that Pokemon later, it really, if it is maybe a Defiant version, it's going to scare off that Incineroar, possibly putting Incineroar lead for the Fake Out, just maybe changing up things again. But if it's one of the Prankster versions, that's an instant Taunt going off on something, it's a Thunder Wave going off on something. And Lunala isn't completely opposed to a Thunder Wave, you know, it's going to like being slower if it gets that Trick Room off. But at the same time, Venusaur is going to hate having a Thunder Wave, because even if Groudon comes in, that is going to be a really bad situation for it to face down. Venusaur is one to switch out though, possibly into the Groudon, which means that, you know, if there was a Thunder Wave into that slot, that's going to be actually very good for Chaiyawat, because that is going to be a turn wasted essentially. And then that means that Kyogre can do maybe a bit more, maybe going for an Ice Beam, predicting that switch, just kind of covering every base here. We do see a Dynamax, which I believe from that Pokeball is likely going to be that Kyogre. And you could even see a Max Hailstorm, which will not only reset the weather, but do a massive chunk to this Groudon, even through any possible Assault Vest or any other items that could have been chosen.
Yeah, and if it goes for that Max Hailstorm right even into that Groudon slot, then you're still getting that chip damage onto the Lunala thanks to the hail at the end of the turn. So, you know, actually a Wild Charge here showing that this is a pretty strong showing that it's a pretty strong Thundurus, and it's going to be taking some Life Orb and some recoil damage, I believe, here. So, you know, Lunala is going to charge up that Meteor Beam, is still moving faster than this Kyogre, so getting this Meteor Beam down, maybe getting the knockout onto this Thundurus is going to be a nice way to probably get yourself set up into a good position to move forward. Even with Shadow Shield broken, you're getting a big threat off of the field, one that you can't exactly touch with Precipice Blades, and it does connect, so it's a pretty simple knockout from there thanks to that extra damage from those from the recoil and the Life Orb. And even at +1, you may still be taking a Max Geyser here, which may be enough to get the knockout. I'm not entirely sure. Probably not. Yeah, so it's not able to, right? It did way less damage than I expected, actually, surprisingly. But the rain coming up at this point means that it's not going to be able to take another one of those. So you're lucky to be moving faster at this point, but any Pokemon that's going to come in is probably going to be a little bit tougher to deal with. Zacian especially can get that knockout onto that Lunala in the next turn. Yeah,
it's going to be really tough for them to deal with, especially because the state of the play. Of course, the rain has been reset here, so Yuma has a really nice upper hand to go in with the Fire-type moves in the Groudon, doing less to a possible Zacian. But at the same time, both these Pokemon in the back are going to hate seeing what a Groudon can throw. Of course, you have things like a Precipice Blades, who can hit either of these Pokemon super effectively. The Intimidate from Incineroar, you know, could neuter that a little bit, but we do see that Yuma does opt just to go in with his Action for that straight out damage, meaning that Groudon has the opportunity to just, you know, go for damage of its own if it does survive these next couple turns. Of course, we could see a Room Protect go on if there is Protect on that Groudon. If it isn't that Assault Vest variant, we of course have to speculate what it could be, and then we also have, you know, the opportunity to just maybe a double up just to guarantee something is knocked out and, you know, clear the field ready for maybe Sinnoh to come back in later and just catch anything off guard. So it could go either way right now, but I think Yuma, with the right strategy, could possibly take this game for Japan.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, right, Chaiyawat has the opportunity to go for a Dynamax. If there's a Dynamax turn, it's going to be now. But I think at this point, you probably want to save it for your Venusaur, who's probably going to come in right now, and allow the Venusaur, or sorry, that's going to stay in the back, but the Venusaur, I think, is going to be your best Dynamax option. You may just need to get it in the sun and allow yourself to sit a little bit more comfortably. Incineroar coming in to get the Intimidate off is great to have in front of this big physical attacker of Zacian, but I think this Behemoth Blade is still probably going to be enough to knock out this Lunala, because you have to understand if you're Yuma that's the bigger threat. You're in the rain, you can get rid of the Lunala, will force the Groudon to come back in later, but without the opportunity to pivot nearly as much as it wants to. And a Max Geyser into this Incineroar is going to be, I think, enough to bring it down. I think it's Focus Sash, yeah. So the Focus Sash on that Incineroar is going to be activated there. No sort of chip damage thanks to the rain to kind of just get that off of the field, but there is not a lot that this Incineroar wants to do, right? If it goes for a Flare Blitz, it's done. And it may just want to try and hard switch out into this Groudon, maybe allow for the Groudon to come in for a second just to change the weather, and allow for this Venusaur to go for something like a Sleep Powder on this turn onto that Kyogre, and then maybe just bring that Incineroar right back in, right? Bring that Incineroar right back in after it brings that Groudon out and get another Intimidate onto this Zacian.
Yeah, getting Incineroar pivoted is something really good with that Focus Sash, and making sure that it catches things like the Zacian and all that off guard is going to be very good if it can do it. Of course, Kyogre, being as fast as it is going to, you know, be able to maybe go for a Max Hailstorm into the other slot, guarantee that the chip does go down onto the Incineroar as well, just making sure that both Pokemon possibly gone. We do see a Protect coming out from the Zacian though, just opting to step back a little bit from the field. No scout what could possibly happen. There is an attack that goes straight into that fake out Protect though. There's a Sleep Powder that goes into the Kyogre, putting it to sleep. No need for that sun whatsoever. And Yuma is now pretty much on the back foot again, because now Zacian facing against both these Pokemon, which can irritate it a lot, especially if that gets put to sleep as well. Unless we see a turn one Wake and maybe an Ice Beam plus something, or just maybe a Water Spout or an Origin Pulse just to maybe get damage across this field. But as you said, Venusaur has got the option to go for the Dynamax, which isn't very nice in front of Zacian, but it could be easy to take it given the circumstances.
Yeah, right. I think at this point, if you bring the Incineroar out, you get your Groudon in, you at least get rid of the rain in case this Kyogre gets another turn one Wake Up, and then you can sit a little bit more comfortably. It is at full HP, so any Water Spout's still going to do a really nice chunk of damage, but you could then go for your Dynamax, move before the Zacian, get something off like a Max Quake to kind of boost your special defense here, and you know, maybe get some big damage off into the Zacian who protected last turn, so it would have to go for a double to try and mitigate some of that damage and that special defense boost. And then you can even allow for that, once this Groudon has come in this turn, you could even allow for the Incineroar to come back on the next turn, especially since this Kyogre has switched out for the Incineroar on Yuma's side, and then maybe allow for your Groudon to come back in afterwards, change up the weather once that Kyogre has also been dealt with. But the Incineroar is a great switch in case there was something like that G-Max Fine Lash this turn into that slot, instead of going for something like that Max Quake into the Kyogre, or sorry, into the Zacian, because then you're not going to be taking that damage really as well. The nice thing would be the chip that the G-Max Fine Lash adds over time. However, you know, you'd love to get that chip damage onto a Pokemon that's also possibly going to get a, you know, maybe knocked out, but seeing that Assault Vest Kyogre, I doubt it. Weather Ball, though, is actually the move into this Zacian, and that, thanks to the sun from that partner Pokemon Groudon, is enough to get that knockout in one hit. So now at this point, I think Chaiyawat has really found a nice rhythm to move in. You've still got this Kyogre. It does have the chance to wake up, and you have fake out pressure for the next turn. However, I don't think there's really much at this point that is stopping Chaiyawat from sending in his own Incineroar just to allow this Groudon to pivot out and just have that final weather control by the end of the match.
Yeah, you do see that Yuma is opting to just go for that forfeit, but just the pivot and change of flow of play in that late game by Chaiyawat was amazing. You know, revealing that Max Flare from Weather Ball so late in the game was crucial to, you know, playing mind games. Like, okay, you got your weather up, I now have a water type move to hit into your water weak Pokemon. Maybe it's got max Quake, it can max Vine Lash the water types. So it had every tool in its kit, like we said at the very start of the game. It has that honorary restrictor status. I think it held up to that code and will go on for the future of VGC.
Yeah, and with that win as well for Chaiyawat, that does actually mean that Thailand has moved on into the top 8 because they were currently up 3-0. So that does knock Japan out of contention. So of course, huge congrats to Japan as well. A little bit of, you know, commiserations for not moving on, but a huge congrats to Thailand for moving on into that top 8. They have had an incredible run so far this year, an incredibly talented team that I don't think everybody was as prepared for as they may have wanted to be. So, you know, those 6 Pokemon that we've seen, the one that, you know, it was Gavin Michaels top 6, I think Joseph Ugarte ran it at maybe NAIC, something close to that. So there's, you know, it's not a core that is uncommon to the metagame, right? It's very popular, it's very consistent. It is great to see it do as well as it has throughout the years. I think I've commentated at least one match with those 6 Pokemon every single week that I've done for World Cup. It's just a team that you see consistently, and it's just so good at what it does. And, you know, like we've said with Rinya's son earlier, it's really just how do you change your set to make it work for you in a situation. And that's why team formats are so nice, because you can get that scouting information on what Japan's been running and say, hey, you may want to run 4 attacks on your Venusaur instead of protect, and then you can have the option to maybe deal with this one thing that Japan has been doing for the past 3 weeks in a row that now we can prep for.
Yeah, it's just the most fantastic things, especially when these countries are fairly close together as well in terms of like their geographical location as well. You can get a lot of crossover, and like players maybe have a better connection with those guys than they do to the rest of the world. But as we saw with like the finishes and like the results the players have, you know, they have connections all over the world. You know, no detail, no stone is left unturned. And it's just amazing to see like the collaborative efforts both in your countries and sometimes you know, other countries as well come together to help teams out. Like I know, you know, like Singapore, they have help from the Nino Pokebrewers as well. But enough about them, because, you know, we've had some amazing conclusions, like you said, teams going through further than they have ever gone before. You might have a bit more information on teams we could expect to see for the rest of the weekend, and maybe a bit of a recap of what we have, you know, in the upcoming slides throughout the rest of this stream.
Yeah, there are still, you know, 5 more matches tomorrow in this top 16. So there is still plenty more Pokemon to see just for this World Cup as well. Tomorrow's matches instantly showing a really interesting one right out of the gate. Sam Pandelis, the 2018 runner-up in World Championships, is definitely a player that I believe did pretty well at Worlds this year. Is also somebody that another player to look out for as well, being Raghav, who from Team India, who Team India has really kind of come out of nowhere this year to me. I say nowhere, even though I will continue to bring this up. I called it with Yuki when Yuki and I did the draft that I thought Team India was going to be one to beat this year. And I'm glad that that's paid off for me, right? We will be seeing God, all of these matches look really, I'm actually very excited now because I am excited to be on tomorrow for them. But there is so much more left in this weekend, and there's still a lot that has yet to be decided. You know, the United States and the Netherlands, I think, has been really interesting. The match that you guys got to see today with the Reshiram on the Netherlands, I think was quite interesting to me, because I love Reshiram. I think it's such an undervalued restricted that I think it's going to be able to, you know, that I think it really paid dividends as well. So, you know, if you want to follow not just with these, though, and you want to follow along with everything Victory Road and everything World Cup, there are plenty of social media options for you guys to do that. There is definitely, you know, we have our Twitter, our YouTube, all of that good stuff. The Twitter itself is a great way to catch when we're going live, put out some tweets, you know, usually 30 minutes or so before. The YouTube, where all of these matches that we're doing commentary on, plus some additional ones, will be uploaded. And then if you want to be a part of really just all of the players in the whole community, going on to the Discord, going to discord.io/victoryroadvgc is a great way to keep up with all of us. And of course, all of the brackets, all of the past tournament information, all of the teams that you guys have seen are available. You know, the 6 Pokemon are available at www.worldcupvgc.com.
Yeah, what an amazing set of resources that Victory Road has really given us. You know, thinking that where VGC's come from, and it's just so good to see, you know, even a post-world scenario. You know, often players are like, oh, we'll just kind of focus on what's coming up, you know, got Scarlet and Violet coming up. Maybe we'll have some stuff coming up for that. I know Victory Road also doing some stuff for like Spike Myth tournaments, maybe Series 13 if people are into that. I know people are kind of a bit of a Marmite situation on that. Some people love it, some people hate it. But it's all stuff to speculate in the future, and of course, we won't let you hold on to that anymore. We'll let you crack down on your team builders, let you open up, message your friends, build teams, and prepare for your future in VGC. But we take a little bit of a break. We'll leave you on for our commentators tomorrow to follow on for the rest of this top 16 bracket.